Hey, praise the Lord, guys. I'm Shaw Greenhorn. And Jesus departed thence and passed through Galilee, and would have no man know it. And then he began to teach the disciples how the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of men and be killed and rise again the third day. Now the disciples understood not this saying, but they were afraid to ask him. And when they were coming to Capernaum, being inside the house, Jesus asked the disciples, what is it that they disputed among themselves along the way? But they held their peace, for along the way they had disputed who among them would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So here we see, the aftermath of him casting the deaf and dumb spirit out of the little boy after the disciples failed to cast it out. We just saw him come down from being transfigured, where his, raiment became as white as light. Elijah and Moses appeared speaking with him. Lord, let us build 3 tabernacles. This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. Why say the scribes that Elias must first come? Elias truly is first come. All these things that just happened. So then when he came down, he saw the scribes questioning with the disciples, and this man, saying that the disciples could not cast the devil out of his son. Jesus, he rebuked the disciples first. So then, we see, they entered the house and they began to ask Jesus, why couldn't we cast it out? Jesus said, this kind goeth out only by prayer and fasting. And I highlighted the fact that, the disciples, they did not go out praying and fasting because, Jesus, he had told, when they asked him, said that, can the children of the bridegroom mourn while the bridegroom is yet with them? And I explained, just how disadvantageous this was to them. Because, yeah, it wasn't time for them to fast. But then, then they would lose the benefit of being able to handle these things. Some people want the benefits without the commitment. We've seen that in relationships. A person would want to just be friends with benefits and not want to commit to a person. In certain business partnerships, a person, they will want the services, but they don't want to sign the contract, for a long-term, relationship. So, this disciples reaching for this power, and that's exactly what they were doing, reaching for this power, without committing, which is the fasting and the praying. And you can see, as much as they were right next to Jesus, they were still ineffective. That just goes to show that every man has to put in his own work. You can't rely on the work of another man, because there was the chief shepherd right next to them, Jesus, but then being unable, So then we pick up where we see, it says that, they passed over and passed through Galilee, not having any man know it. So, Jesus, he does things for reasons. Sometimes, he wants to be seen, sometimes he does not. Because if you understand, the kingdom of God is different errands, it's different tasks. Laying hands on people and casting out devils and teaching, that's a great thing. But this just goes to show you that there was something, more hidden, more secret, that, in these kind of moments when he would have no man know it, the word says, walk while it is yet day, for when the night cometh, no man can know it. But understand that different, tasks are set. I can prove that, to you by John the Baptist. It was prophesied of him, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make all his paths straight. All of John's work was in the spirit. Remember, Jesus, he can do whatever he wants. Who knows if this wasn't a secret moment where not even the devil could see them. But then, if the multitude were to gather around, then they would pick up clues that something's going on, right? Who knows if Jesus wasn't moving behind the scenes of the devil in instances like this. So he's passing through Galilee and will have no man know it. This goes to show you the different tasks, and Jesus being the perfectly rounded minister that he was, it was something else to be addressed right here. We have to read between the lines. We have to pick up all the things that are not said. He's walking through right here and wants no man to know it. I believe this is how many times has he passed through Galilee now? Maybe his work there is done. Maybe it was just the fact that other cities needed him that did not get. Who was it? It was Paul that said that, I robbed other churches to pay you wages, to do you service. How many churches was Jesus robbing? Maybe it was that. Maybe it was just the fact that he was heading to one of these places that got robbed wages. Just to balance things out. Like I said, maybe he was on a secret mission and, the devil, he couldn't see him. But then if a bunch of people are gathering around, then they'll have a clue that something's up, right? You've heard of the term monitoring spirits. Because, why are monitoring spirits needed? Because in times of rest of the person, you see when they're like at home, just doing nothing, then this person, it needs to be around to see, okay, when are they going to go on the move? And then, when they're on the move, it's not so much monitoring spirits anymore, but it's, pursuing spirits. I always say the monitoring spirits are more passive. So they monitor until, action is being done. Action is being, initiated and carried out. Then the bigger boys, they come in and then they start to pursue more aggressively. So Jesus, he's in, incognito right now, just passing through. Nobody knows, walking up to surprise the enemy. There's many reasons why he would not, even beyond that I can list. Have that kind of mind. Have that kind of mind where, you can appreciate things like that. That even if we were to sit down and list all the things that we could, there's still more as to why he would not want to be made known. And then, he starts to break it down again how he's going to be crucified. And, they were dumbfounded. They were afraid to ask. If you look at, he just rebuked Peter, right? When Peter took him and said, these things shall not happen unto thee. So they did understand. Because what would Peter say, it's not going to happen? And Jesus had to rebuke him, saying, "Get thee hence, Satan. Thou savors not the things that be of God, but the things that be of man." He just did that. In this very chapter, the chapter, we're at the beginning right now of Mark 9. It was like at the end of chapter 8. He just told it. They just had the discussion where he said that, he had to reframe it. If any man shall, come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. Because Peter was trying to, like I said in that video, he was trying to change the meaning of things, trying to make it be about glory. Because you see, they're asking right now, who is it that's going to be the greatest? Who's going to be sitting on that throne while everybody says, Hosanna, and bow the knee and worship them? Peter, in this moment, he's trying to make it mean something else. Not understanding the mission of Jesus. Because it's the blood. It's the blood that restores all things, right? What if that blood is not given? How will things be restored? And this just shows you that there are things that even God has to respect. There's things that even God has to respect. So, and this just goes to show you also that sometimes the mind, it snaps back to its original, beliefs and thoughts and the way it operated. It just snaps back. It's automatic, it's subconscious, and sometimes we don't have control over it. Because of all the things that, Jesus taught them, all the casting out of devils and restoring the sight of the blind, all the healings, all the doctrine that he taught them, the rebukings to the scribes and Pharisees, how they were superficial, lifting up the traditions of men, the washing of hands and pots and plates and cups and vessels, devouring widows' houses, disfiguring their faces when they fast. All these things, it was supposed to be carrying them somewhere. And in this one moment, Peter, he reached back and snapped all the way back to the beginning where he was. This shall not happen unto you, Lord. Because why? Because it's going to be a sign of weakness if they take you. How can, God's son be taken and be killed? That means that these people, they're stronger than him, right? Changing the meaning of things according to his understanding, which right now he's operating in what they will call the flesh. There's a thing that happens to human beings where you're doing something and, in that moment, you don't appear to know that it's wrong or right, and you're doing it. But then when somebody shows up, it's like you try to hide it. Why were you trying to hide it if it's something that you were supposed to be doing? But yet still, while doing it, you had no sense of right or wrong. You had no sense that, this could be dishonorable, that is something that should not be done. Because, as soon as Jesus asked them what they were doing, they held their peace. You ever seen a parent come in the room, one of the children has broken something. When the parent walks in, they all just get quiet. So on some level, they know they shouldn't have been, doing this. I just finished the book of Matthew. We saw where the mother of Zebedee's children, James and John, her husband was Zebedee. She came saying, grant me that I will ask. Ask that one of, each of my sons may sit on your left and your right in the kingdom of your glory. So, these boys, they did the ultimate thing, right? They went to mom and tried to let mom get what they were asking. So using mom to get, this thing. Because that he's likely to say yes if it's the mom, right? And, before that, each book, like I said, it takes a different progression. It highlights different things. But, at this moment in the other books, is where, because, they had been disputing along the way, right? So then you see, after all this, they went and got mom. Let mom get, because we're all arguing. Well, we're gonna let our mom get it for us. Jesus, he sets the tone here, saying, you don't know what you ask. Can you drink of the cup I will drink of? It's suffering, it's rejection, it's being ostracized, it's being lied on so viciously. So we see Jesus in the house, calling them unto him like that father, because he could tell. Parents, they're blessed, with intuition by God to take care of their children. So, a parent, they know these things. When they can, even though they can't see it fully, they feel it, they sense it. So, he calls them like that parent, Jesus, the chief shepherd, and asks them, what is it that they disputed by the way? If Jesus could know their thoughts, the scribes and Pharisees, in this moment, why is he asking them? I don't know, maybe to take on a different approach instead of, being angry at them. Because how much does anger accomplish, right? Somebody's angry at you, angry enough at you, you won't hear anything that they say. All you do is sit there and being angry, and you get, should I run? Should I hide? That's what you're focusing on. So overall, we see here, like I said, after, casting out the demon from this boy, lifting him up, restoring him to his father, I spoke about the multiple things that, deliverance entails. And in this one, we're seeing the multiple things that ministry itself entails. It's not just all about, going out, being seen, being revered and worshipped, preaching and healing. There's other things, there's the tearing down of strongholds. There's the, reconnaissance. There's the claiming new territory, going unseen, walking up into new territory, then announcing yourself, not giving them time to prepare a defense, not giving them time to scout or to be on guard. All right, so let's get into these scriptures. It starts out saying, and Jesus departed thence and passed through Galilee, and would have no man know it. So like I said, he just departed. I forget the name of the place. So he just went out into the mountain. He got transfigured. Like I said, he healed the little boy of this devil. Before that, we saw that he asked the question, "Who do men say I am?" Some say Elias or John the Baptist, one of the old prophets, the Christ, the Son of the living God. We saw before that. We saw him, heal the blind man. He led him all the way out of town. He put spittle on his eyes. Then he said, "I see men as trees." Then he readjusted it. Then he saw all men clearly. Before that, it was the scribes and Pharisees asking of a sign from heaven. He said, "No sign shall be given to this sinful adulterous generation." Then he warned the disciples, "Beware of the leaven of Herod and of the leaven of the scribes." Them thinking that he was talking about bread, he had to rebuke them again. So you can see Jesus' frustration with the disciples throughout these scriptures. So we see him sometimes passing through, because he did pass through Galilee, before, but this time, he's incognito. Like I said, there's many places he has to go to, and his time is not that long, because he does get crucified before his next birthday, right? And there's so many that need help. This just goes just show you his vigilance branch out into new areas. A lot of ministers, they're married to their pulpit, to their building. They can't ever go out. But not Jesus. He was determined. He said, "Occupy till I come." That's what he said, right? I've learned that branching out, it keeps you humble. Why? Because you see in your own church, everybody knows you. Whether you're the pastor or just a minister, they know you, and they'll encourage you. They'll clap for you. They're not gonna reject you. I mean, unless you go and say something absolutely, bonkers, right? But see, going out into new places, where they don't know you, you get to see rejection. Now, this rejection, it teaches you to appreciate those around you more. You see, those that support you in your church, you don't take them for granted. Because imagine just being told, "Get the F out of my face," by this whole bunch of people. When you come home and you see your church, your people, it's like, wow, look at the support I have. As opposed to taking them for granted, calling them names, talking down to people, thinking that you're better than people, going out, it keeps you fresh and away from pride and pomp. So he would not have any man know it. I mean, are any ministers like that today around? I mean, they're so reaching for fame. They're so reaching to be known, to be respected. I guarantee you, none of them are gonna say, "You know what? Let no one know I'm here." No, they want to know. They want everyone to know they're there. But like I said, him would have no one know it. Think about what he must be accomplishing in here. Denying the flesh, fame, being worshipped and revered. Being considerate of others. Who else that have I not gotten to yet? He said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." How can I make you fishers of men if I myself am not a fisher of men? How can I be a fisher of men if I stay just in one place? I mean, I guess you could still be a fisher of men, but you would be just catching the same. It would just be catch and release. Because when you've been to that pond long enough, you caught everything. There's nothing left, right? So then what? You gotta release the ones you caught, right, and recatch those, right? So the next one says, "Then he began to teach the disciples how he must be delivered into the hands of men and be killed and rise again the third day." So then he began, and this is really incorrect language, because if this right here, it says that he began to teach men how he must be killed and rise again. That's not true. Did Peter not just take him and rebuke him for saying these very things? No, he continued to teach them. Now he began, but he continued to teach them how he must suffer many things. But you see, for them, look at how they responded. It's like hearing it for the first time. He might as well have been saying it for the first time. So in one ear, out the other. I said in one of my videos that it seems like they should have notebooks with them, and they should be reviewing all these things daily. And this is not something that needs to be reviewed, but if you think about it, I said, and I keep saying, they were so unfamiliar with these things that the Christ was to come and die. And why? This just goes to show you that there was no comprehensive teaching, surrounding future events being in the Old Testament. They didn't sit down and take all the scriptures written and look for Jesus and the events that would, take place while he was here. Because, they would have been primed. Even the scribes and Pharisees, you could tell they knew of the Messiah, the name, but the actions, they knew nothing. So then, like I said, what were these scribes teaching, in the synagogues? The statutes, "Thou shalt and thou shalt not. Thou ought to do this, thou ought not to do that." So he began to teach them how the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of men. In one, scripture we hear it says, betrayed into the hands of men and be killed. So you gotta understand where they're coming from. This is their Lord, and they love him, right? They're so used to the fishes and the loaves, being worshipped everywhere they go. They don't see an end to this coming. They say sometimes good things come to an end, so that better things may come. What he said, if I go another way, then the comforter cannot come, right? If I don't do this, then you see all these things. And that's the thing. You see, if I don't go and be killed and rise again, you see, everything I've done and I've taught is going to be in vain. Paul said, if Christ be not risen, we be what? Men most miserable, right? We have no hope, nothing to look forward to. Because, we shall all die. That's what God said. We weren't supposed to die, before that fruit was eaten. But now it's eating and we are going to die. I told in one video how the scribes and Pharisees, they're living in the past. Because, they're saying that it's, eat with unwashed hand. Jesus said it's not what goes into the man, but what comes out of the man. And I said that, the scribes and Pharisees, they're trying to live in the past. They're trying to rewind time and go back to the Garden of Eden and do things over. We missed that chance. When we ate that fruit, we missed that chance. They're trying to live in the past and recreate that moment because we missed the chance to be clean by what went inside when we ate that. So now we have to monitor all the things that come out. And I said in one video that they're really reaching for the easier thing because that is easier. Do not eat that fruit. That's much easier. But know that we have such an evil heart. Do not lust. Think about murder. Don't be too angry. Don't be covetous. Don't be jealous of other people's things. Don't wish bad on people. Don't do evil to people. Know that we have an evil heart. I would say the difference is like, imagine you had like a hourglass full of sand. How easy would it be to hold the sand in the hourglass, right? Whether you turn it upside down or not, just to hold it. It would be so easy, right? Well, that was, thou shalt not eat of the fruit. But now that we have eaten of the fruit, we have broken that hourglass. And now the sand is just in our hand. How much harder is it to hold the sand in your hand and to not let any fall to the ground? So we miss what was easy. I know we have to do the harder thing. I know on some level they know, and that's where they're trying to go back to the easier thing. But we missed that chance. So he began to teach them how Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of men. He hasn't begun breaking it down that it's Judas. Judas is sitting right there with them. How even when at the Last Supper he dipped and gave sop to who should betray him, it didn't even register in their minds because they would have said Judas, and they would have started questioning with him. So right here, he's not revealing that information yet. Because remember, after he gave him sop, then Judas, he went right to them. And then he went to the garden and get somebody right after that. And then that's where they took him. So he didn't give them time to develop hatred for Judas for doing what he did. All right, so the next scripture says, and they would have asked him what it meant, but they were afraid. Because, like I said, he's expecting something from them. And we just saw how upset he was with them, with Peter, for saying this shall not happen to you. He said, get thee hence, Satan. Thou savest not the things that be of God, but the things that be of men. That's something they got wrong. Beware of the leaven of the scribes and Pharisees and of Herod. They thought that it's because we have forgotten to take bread. Are you yet without understanding? Have you yet your hearts yet hardened? He was upset at them with that. Like I said, it's not what goeth into the mouth, but what cometh out. He was upset with them with that. They couldn't cast the devil out of this boy. He called them faithless and perverse. They were afraid to ask him because at this point they know that they're not retaining what they're being taught. Because if you look at Jesus, he's gonna say, well, this is where you should be, but this is where you actually are. So one conclusion can be made from all this. They did themselves no favors by not fasting. By waiting until the bridegroom was taken, they did themselves no favor. And you see, when an athlete does not put in the work and he goes out, trying to compete with everybody else and he falls flat, all he can do is wish in his heart. And this is what was happening to them. They weren't putting in the work. I mean, Jesus even gave them a reason. But you see, at the end of the day, nothing beats, showing up for yourself. Nothing beats putting in the work, even if you are with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So they were afraid to ask him. I mean, he just said all these things to us. As a matter of fact, he just told Peter all these things. Whosoever shall come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. Whosoever shall, find his life shall lose it. But whosoever shall lose his life shall find it. You see, whosoever shall lose his life shall find it. Whosoever shall find it shall lose it. There was their answer, just given to them. Less than 30 verses ago. Less than 30 verses ago, this answer was given to them. Less than 30 verses. So they have all right to be worried that, and be afraid to ask him. You guys are not, paying attention. You're not considering. You're supposed to be building things with these things that he's given you. So they were afraid to ask him what it meant. They understood not what it meant, and they were afraid to ask him. So now, the answer that they're supposed to have, they won't get. So, something can be learned. Maybe, and I mean, who can speak against Jesus, right? No man can speak against Jesus. But, would you rather the people that you're over have the answers to everything? Or would you rather them be afraid to ask you certain things? No man can rebuke Jesus. But in this moment, they need this information and they're afraid to ask, right? But then, after frustration, do they get replaced? Does he kick them out and get 12 more disciples. So the next verse says, then they were come into Capernaum, being inside the house. Jesus asked the disciples, what is it that they disputed among themselves by the way? So we passed through Galilee, we're now in Capernaum. If you know Capernaum, it was said that thou art exalted to heaven, the highest heavens, but thou shalt be brought down to hell. When he was given these warnings, warn to thee, Bethsaida, if the words were speaking in thee which were spoken in Tyre and Sidon, it would have remained. Capernaum, thou art exalted to the heavens, but thou shalt be brought down to hell. If the words were spoken in thee were spoken in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. So, going by this, you can see that Capernaum, they were exalted in pride and pomp. No, I would have to ask a more expert than myself to expound, and because I don't really see Capernaum what they did, but they did something, and they rejected him. That's why he said that. So he waited until they got inside the house, asking them what they disputed up by the way. So we're dropping this whole them not understanding what he's about to be delivered into the hands of men, be crucified, killed, and rise again the third day. So this was also one of the things. So you can see right here, they disputed two things along the way. The fact that they didn't understand what he meant when he said that, and now this, that he's about to answer. So it's two things at least that they disputed by the way. So we're skipping over the first one. So he waited till they got in the house, because remember, he would always wait until they're alone. Then he would expound unto them all these things. So then the Bible says in the last one, but they held their peace. For by the way, they had disputed among themselves who it is that would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So he's asking them, and in this moment now, I bet they were sporting, when it was, who it was it Abraham or Isaac? I believe it was Isaac, right? Sporting with Rebecca when he told him she was his sister. He was afraid they would kill him. So they must have been sporting with each other, right? Something was going on. Like, I'm saying, no, I'll be the best because this and this and that. The next one saying, no, I'll be the best because of this and this and that, and they were there carrying on. But, Jesus, he was focused on other things, leading the way. Sometimes, and this just goes to show you, sometimes being a leader, you have to focus on what it is that you're accomplishing. You see, after you've done it, then you can turn around and address everybody. Because why didn't he just address it right then and there? Because he was focused on something, right? Something more important. He was focused on something more important that needed his attention. And then what are they focusing on? So you see, having people around you that have the wrong vision, what are they focusing on? But remember, at the same time, in their defense, all these things are new. Nobody knew these things. I guarantee you, whoever he would have taken, they would have been as bad or even worse. So being focused on the wrong thing, and they said they held their peace. Like I said, sometimes we don't know what we're doing, is less than, reputable or something that we should be doing. But then Jesus, he calls them, and if it was something honorable, then they would have, picked up right where they left off, saying, oh no, tell him I'll be the best. No, you tell him, but I'll be the best. Why are you saying that? Simon Peter saying, well, it's always me he's talking to. I'm going to be the best. John saying, well, no, I'm the disciple he loves. I'm going to be the best. The James and John saying, no, he named us the sons of thunder. We're going to be the best. Judas saying, well, he trusts me the most. I have the money back. I'm going to be the best. Thomas saying, when he said Lazarus was dead, I said, let us go and die with him. So, I'm committed unto death. I'm going to be the best. But they held their peace because they knew the conscience right here. For they disputed among themselves who would be the best in the kingdom of heaven. Did they not listen when he said, what were you ought to see in the wilderness? A reed shaking with the wind. What were you ought to see? A man clothed in soft raiment. I tell you, those that being soft raiment being king's palaces. But I say unto you, among those born of women, there hath not risen a greater than John the Baptist. Nevertheless, he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. I said in one video, with this saying, we leave John the Baptist as the highest in this world. Remember, he is also going to be in the kingdom of heaven. So in the kingdom of heaven, he's going to be higher than he was here on the kingdom of earth. It's not that everybody is just going to go over him. Because he said what? He that is least in the kingdom of heaven shall be higher than John the Baptist. It's not that everybody is going to go over him. No, John the Baptist himself is going to be higher than John the Baptist, being in the kingdom of heaven. I am Straw Greenhorn.